We're recording. Hello, welcome. Discover Tai Chi for LimbPower. I'll just double check that we're all muted. We are. You're all seasoned professionals. Okay, so let's get started. It'll be our usual mix of seated and standing. If you're on the WhatsApp group, you may have seen my rather cryptic kind of call saying that I'm going to muse on Tai Chi a little bit for us, but embody that with movement, because that's what Tai Chi is. It's an embodied philosophy. Let me take my glasses off, do my bits and bobs. So I'll start standing. So if we're stood up, see if we can get a bit of a base of support. If you are sat down, if you are seated, that could be a wheelchair or it could just be a regular chair. See if you can have a sense of active sitting. By that I mean, can you leave the back of the seat behind so that you're self-supporting? Can you be a little bit kind of engaged with the seat? Active sitting, okay? And we're going to do our familiar weight shift. So let's just do that. Just get into, it's almost like we're testing the waters. But what we're interested in is this sense of base of support with the earth that carries us. And it does. And in Tai Chi terms, that's what we really want to keep as our focus, keep as our base. If anything else, we can always return to base. And you might remember the story of poor old Atlas, who ends up carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Well, we're not like that in Tai Chi. We take the world off, pop it down, and then we stand on top of it, because that's what we do in reality. We live on the earth. So that's our first little musing. We live on the earth. And by doing this purposeful, deliberate weight shift, feeling sensation through our seat, if we are seated, or through our feet, even if they are prosthetic limbs, we still get sensation somewhere. I know sometimes it can be painful and uncomfortable. It's sensation nevertheless. It tells us that we are on our base. So I'm just going to walk my feet in. We'll keep that sense of movement going, but just relieve some pressure if possible. Sometimes just bringing our feet in can facilitate that. So there's our first base of support, home. We're at home in this position. So let's explore a bit further. Let's explore space. Okay, so I am going to go for a bit more of a wider stance. You can choose now which is most comfortable for you. So find a position that's good for you, seated or standing. Let's do part the clouds. So that involves crossing the hands, bringing them in front of the chest, turning the palms forward, and then we lift up and we look up, and there above us is the night sky. And we bring the hands down and we cross the opposite hand over, and once again we come up. And every time we look up, there above us is the night sky. And we might need to use our imaginations as we go through this movement, because it's certainly rainy and cloudy where I am in Yorkshire. So if you don't have clear skies where you are, we're going to have to imagine a starry lit evening. So as we look up and look into space, we can quite literally be in awe of that vast expanse out there. But at the same time, if we keep contact with our base, our seat or our feet, we can also keep our sense of perspective. We could maybe have a breath in as we do this, because looking out to space might literally take your breath away. So sometimes it's worth reminding ourselves of that breath of ours. That's our second principle as we embody that reaching out into space. But yeah, we do. We live on the earth. And as far as we know, there's nothing else like us anywhere else. Maybe sometime in the future, but right now, this is it. So that brings us back home, doesn't it? It brings us back to base. So that's our second principle. We've got base here on Earth, and we've got space. Our Earth floats around. Is floating the right word? Probably not, but you get the idea. In space, part of a solar system, part of a bigger galaxy. If you're a fan of Professor Brian Cox, it's big. It's very big. But that gives us a sense of place. Okay, so let's do another movement. Let's have a focus on our breath. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the hands round on the outside, lift them up, and then bring everything down to earth. But as we lift, this could be a big breath in. And then we let that breath go on the down. Don't worry if you need some intermediary breaths, but see if we can get a big sense of breath in. The lifting of the hands helps the rib cage lift. And if we think about it, we're breathing in the breath of life, oxygen, along with some nitrogen and some carbon dioxide and a few other things. But that's the main gist, our breath. And the thing is, if you think about it, our breathing connects us with everyone and everything else on the earth, on this planet. Because we're all breathing in one sense. I'm just going to give us a break and a little rest. But as you take a breath in, that's an exchange of oxygen that's been produced by our plants, which gives us an immediate connection. And as we breathe out, if we were in a room with one another, we'd all be exchanging breath, wouldn't we? It gives us a very tangible sense of connection if we really think about it. And on an intuitive level, that's exactly what the Chinese were trying to get at when they use the term qi, as in qigong. So what we've done there is kind of think about breath in a very down-to-earth and pragmatic way. So let's do another movement that kind of embraces that idea. So let me come a little bit closer. We'll do a pushing movement or a rowing movement. If some of you can maybe get a foot forward, great. If you sat down, a kind of sense of shift, emphasizing the right side is a good way to think about it. If not, and you need to keep nice and square on, that's okay. We're just emphasizing the right side. There's a little turn, and we're just going to push and then lift. So it's our familiar making waves. So we've got our base, we've got space, and now we've got connection through our breath with everything around us. So this is a nice movement. because it lends itself very nicely to the ebb and flow of the breath if we wish. Because we can have an in-breath as we draw back and an out-breath as we push forward. But if we hold in mind that every single time we do that, we're exchanging molecules of the air with everything around us. I've got houseplants and I'm getting a little exchange with my houseplants at the moment. So we can just have that as a little meditation almost of connection. I'm going to swap to the left side. So if you had your foot forward, as I suggested, this is an opportunity to do the same with the left, or just stay square on, have a bit of an emphasis, and again, push. Sometimes people like to think of this as rowing or sculling. I quite like the idea of making waves, because again, that gives us a physical connection with the ocean and the seas, and a real tangible sense of energy. Not energy in any kind of mystical sense, but just if you're in the sea or in a watery environment, you really feel how waves, the energy that's contained within the water, moves us. So we've got base, space, we've got connection, and we've got movement. Sometimes we're the mover, and sometimes we're the one being moved by circumstances beyond our control. Okay, come back. So Tai Chi gives us this sense of balance. We can never have one without the other. There's elements that we control, there's elements we don't control. And when we do Tai Chi movements, the idea is that we actually actively hold some of these ideas in mind. Maybe not all the time, but from time to time, these are kind of active, shall we call them meditations? Alan Watts, if you've ever come across Alan Watts, would perhaps say they're contemplations, they're things to kind of gently muse upon. So I'm going to sit down. So I've got my base. There it is. A nice sturdy seat box. Our logo, if you perhaps have wondered about it, is a square within a circle. And it represents this sense of base, represented by the square, but in a funny way represents the earth. But it represents the cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. And then with circle represents space, the universe around us, and that we're situated right in the center. Maybe not literally, but we have this sense of being centered. Okay, let's do another movement. And seeing as we've mentioned the 4 directions, let's do 4 directions. So this kind of brings us to rest a little bit. So we're going to be pushing forwards, to the sides, up and down. So again, think of pushing boundaries this time. We exist within a bounded space. So if we pick our hands up, we can have a sense of pushing boundaries. Literally, perhaps. Draw those hands back. And then off to the sides. But also figuratively speaking as well. Pushing boundaries. Draw those hands back. This time upwards, and we're pushing. It's as if we're expanding boundaries around us. And we could think about maybe how we are bounded. I'm now pushing down. Lovely. We'll go again. From a sort of Tai Chi perspective, we would think about, okay, what are the boundaries that are useful for us? What are the boundaries that keep us safe, for instance? What are the boundaries between what's acceptable and what's not acceptable? So those are useful boundaries. Sometimes we are faced with constraints, not of our own choosing, that aren't actually useful to us. And sometimes we have to push against those boundaries because they're unfair. History is replete with people who have pushed through boundaries that have been imposed on them. And again, Tai Chi recognizes this dynamic between safe boundaries and boundaries that could well do with being crossed. So let's go again. Push forward. Push against those boundaries. As we draw the hands back, it could be a breath in. There's that connection as we push to the sides with a breath out. Take a big breath in. Pushing upwards again, exploring those boundaries. Bring the hands down. And then pushing down. Excellent. So then when we begin to think of maybe focusing on the constraints and boundaries that sometimes we create for ourselves, can we sort them as well? Can we sort them into those that are useful? And then maybe some that we adopted maybe a while ago for some good reason, but now we don't really need them, but they hang around. So that's why we've got cast your cares away. Casting your cares away. This is where we lift our right hand. I look to the left, and then it's as if I throw my cares away, off in that direction. And then I pick up the left hand, find another constraint, and throw it away. And then picking up the other side, so I get some useful rotation, but at the same time I'm thinking about things that I may have in my life that actually don't serve me in the way that I hoped they might do. Or maybe they've reached the end of their natural life and I don't actually need some of those constraints or boundaries because my situation has changed. So I'm just casting my cares away. Sometimes we can think of a physical object that embodies those cares, a ball perhaps, or sometimes it could be a stone. Whatever it is, we embody that sense of having the agency to offload those cares as we do so. Okay, I'm going to do one more, otherwise it feels like I've got a lot of cares to cast away. It's a kind of active part of day-to-day life, thinking about in what ways do boundaries and constraints help and serve, and in other ways in which ones maybe get in the way and stop us doing things. That can be our own self-talk, or it can be, again, what other people put in place around us. Okay, so let's pull some good stuff towards us. So we'll use pull the rope. So I'm going to bring my hands in. I'm going to reach out. We're going to wrap and collect our rope connected to our boat, and we draw that boat in as I reach out again. And with each pull, I bring my boat closer to me. And my boat could be filled with good things, whatever that means. Things that we would like to draw towards ourselves. As we do so, we imagine that boat coming nearer and nearer. But you'll notice that we're having to engage in a little bit of work or effort to get that boat to come towards us. It's very rare that we can sit back passively and just allow things or expect things to come to us. Sometimes we have to be engaged in reaching those things that we want, or holding close those things that we've already got, and just reminding ourselves that we want to keep them as we do so. All the while, we can draw that boat. And for our purposes, we're going to let that boat come in. What do we say sometimes if we're the receiver of good fortune, whatever that might be? We might say our boat has come in. So let's imagine our boat comes in on this last pull. We're not going to lose our base. We're not going to lose our place despite our boat coming in. We're always going to keep our feet, literally, metaphorically, on the ground or our seat. Okay, let's keep a little bit with this watery analogy and let's go for a swim so that we can explore this space around us. So I'm going to bring my hands together. Little finger edges are touching. You see that? I'm going to push them forwards. Keep the little fingers touching and then palms over the thumbs, backs of the hands, and then and only then do we do our swim back until we come back to where we started. And we can just slowly, incrementally push forward, palms over the thumbs, get to the backs of the hands, and only then do we swim. So it's a very leisurely swim. Very mindful, shall we say, of each position. Really useful for the shoulders. But it also gives us a sense of agency. Because learning to swim is jolly difficult because water's very tricky substance. You can't get hold of it. You've kind of got to get a feel for it. But if you're in that lucky position where you have learnt to swim, then it gives you the ability to set off and explore as we do so. So let's have that idea that we can swim at our leisure. And one of the lovely things about swimming is if you're particularly in the ocean, is that you're pretty much within your capabilities, almost able to go anywhere. Might take some time, but you've got all the oceans to go at. I always like to think of a sea turtle, just making those immense journeys that they do. Just that nice swimming, but it's a nice movement for the shoulders. And we're just kind of musing on that idea that we've got the freedom to swim. Fab. I'm going to come back to a standing position. Rejoin people who have stood up for the last 5 minutes. So, if we come back to our base, our connection with the earth, and maybe again we just get back into that very easy rhythm from one side and then to the other. If we're in our seat, we're shifting weight from one hip to the other, very gently. very easily. So we've been for a swim in the ocean. We can have a sense of swimming in the air as well. Again, sometimes Tai Chi is described as swimming in air. And we've got a very nice movement for that. It's a familiar one for many of you. It's called wave hands in clouds. So let's do that, because now it's going to give us a sense of airiness. So let's bring that right hand around. The other nice analogy with this movement is that we bring an imaginary partner into this. So I'm holding a partner between the shoulder blades and the small of the back. Here's my right hand on top. And if I lead my partner to the right, just a bit, and then I take my hands and exchange them, take the right hand off, bring the left hand into the top, and then lead my partner off to the left, and then take the hands off and swap places, and just have a very relaxed embrace. Don't let tension creep into the shoulders as we just shift weight from one side to the other. So now we're sharing the sense of our base, our home, with another. And we're in space. And we're exploring that space with wave hands in clouds. Such a good name. Gives us a sense. And it also gives us a sense of, again, connection through the breath, because we're talking about the clouds, and the Chinese were very interested, or the ancient Chinese were interested in clouds because clouds captured something that they didn't quite know, but they knew was important. And it was only later when science helped us understand what the air is made of and what clouds kind of manifest with water vapor, that there's this sense of the breath or the air being the thing that gives us life. So as my teacher used to say, the breath of life. And here we are sharing it with a partner from one side and then to the other. And we're just going to bring our little dance to a halt. And we'll let our dance partner fade away. We can always bring them back. So there we go. We've gone on a journey, starting with our base, which is always a good place to come back to. And that's what we're going to do. And then we've explored space and this sense of connection that we have very tangibly with our breath, and that we can also explore the environment around us in different ways. And we've got boundaries and constraints. Some are helpful, some maybe not so. But we can begin to try and make some decisions about those. So sometimes it's useful to just come to a rest, because that helps us really come home. Helen tells me that when she lived in Vietnam, she came across this idea that was exchanged between friends, really close friends, or partners, which was that when you held someone's hand, you were coming home. There was a sense of, you are my home. Whoever that person was that you were holding hands with, you were home. And I thought that was a lovely idea, that it's the other person or the other people in your life that is home. We kind of say home is where the heart is, don't we? Which gives us a kind of allusion to that. So let's finish off. We're going to do Qi Shi, where we just lift. Breath in with that sense of connection. And every time we let the hands drop, we can come home, base. But every time we lift, we get a sense of space. So there's that alternation. Once again, Tai Chi simply represents this dynamic of opposites. And if we do that one more time, could be a breath in. But this time, as we let the breath go, we can link our thumbs, let our hands come to rest right on the lower part of the abdomen. And now we really do just come to a rest on the earth. And the only thing that we're really kind of mindful of in terms of movement is our breath. Everything else is still. So we can just rest and muse on that idea that with every breath, we're connecting with people and everything else really that exists on this lovely blue planet of ours. And then when you're ready, we can part the hands. And there we go. I hope that has been an enjoyable little journey or meditation. Hope it's provoked some ideas and thoughts. I'm going to let you go, or if you have any questions, please do hang around, but I'm going to stop the recording